Thank you, Chair. Morning, Mr. Ayres, Mr. Gantley.
Good morning.
This scheme's, quietly awful, isn't it? Simply awful. Looking at the people out there who've suffered as a result of faulty installations. So, could you just explain to the committee very simply what your responsibilities are, your organisations, for this scheme, and how far you hold your hands up and say we were responsible for the failures as well? Mr. Ayres, do you want to go first?
Thank you. Our accountability for this scheme is based around the way Trustmark operates, which is we work through a series of scheme providers. Those scheme providers register businesses for Trustmark. We have, since 2005, been delivering within the home improvement sector. And that home improvement sector has obviously had ups and downs all the way through that period. Coming to the specifics to your question, we really started to recognise that there had been a change in delivery programmes. And I would like to put on record that the installation installed correctly is one of the best things we can possibly do to reduce the cost of delivery. When we started to look at this scheme, we realised that a move from a single measure previous eco scheme. So previously eco had been installation of a loft, for instance, or cavity wall normally on its own, to a multi-measure, probably low carbon and insulation scheme, which we had on eco 4. We started to see that there were challenges in that delivery. And the reason you had challenges had been you had businesses that were then looking to manage multiples of outputs. So that would be not just insulation, it could be low carbon, it could be electrical.
Wait a minute, so you just said, when you realised, shouldn't you have realised before the scheme actually got operational?
Looking in hindsight, then yes, we should have looked and realised that the move from a single measure scheme to a multi-measure scheme would have had many complications in its delivery. We didn't recognise that at that point in time. But very quickly we recognised that there was a need for businesses to have a greater level of control over the multiple challenges that would come with retrofitting a property.
So you weren't involved in the design of the scheme, you were just given it after it had started, basically, to operate?
So following the Each Home Counts review in 2018, or 16 to 18, coming out of that was something called PAS 2035, which was a whole house approach. And our role was to oversee the delivery of that PAS standard. And that standard set the parameters for which a business should operate. And it's taken a period of time for the identification to see that not all those areas were being delivered.
We'll probably come back in it. Mr. Gantley, then, you're responsible for the scheme in the wider sense. So it's your responsibility, all this problem, is it?
Thank you. Thank you for the opportunity to clarify our remit and our role. If I can briefly just give you some short background to our role, our remit, and the oversight of UCAS itself and our connection with the certification bodies and then their connection, particularly with the installers. So first of all, UCAS is the United Kingdom Accreditation Service. Our role is to evaluate the conformance of testing, inspection, certification, calibration, validation and verification. Collectively, we refer to those as conformity assessment bodies. In the case of ECO, we accredit certification bodies. Those certification bodies evaluate according to relevant PAS requirements, in this case PAS 2030 and PAS 2031, that the installer has met the appropriate requirements, that they are competent to be able to undertake that installation. So simply put, there's 3 levels of that process. We accredit the certification bodies then certify those installers, but ultimately the responsibility for the quality of the delivery of the installation is with the retrofit installer. Just briefly about our background. So we're a self-financed, not-for-profit organisation, non-profit distributing. We operate under a memorandum of understanding with the Department of Business and Trade. We are a company limited by guarantee. We have 26 guarantors. They include the DESNES, the Department of Business and Trade, Ministry of Defence, and many other different professional institutes and bodies which oversee the work that we do. We're also subject to oversight audits by the European accreditation bodies. Our last audit was...
A lot of words there, Mr. Ganti. I think most people won't have an idea what you actually were doing. I'm sorry. I mean, in the end, what responsibility had you for this scheme? Were you involved in the design of it and the requirements to oversee it properly? Were you doing that from the beginning of the scheme?
Yeah, we've actually accredited the certification linked to eco schemes since 2012. So previous iterations of eco, which there was much lower levels of non-compliance. So we, in Eco4 and the GBIS scheme, we accredited there's currently 8 certification bodies who certify the installers to PAS 2030, and there is also a standard called PAS 2031.
What was your role then in the failings that happened?
So what we do, we have a limited role. We don't have any direct connection with the installer or the retrofit coordinator. We don't have any sanction or produce any guidance or requirements for the installers or the retrofit coordinators. That's done by Trustmark. We don't monitor the installers and we don't monitor the retrofit coordinators. We assess...
What did you do? I'm sorry, it's very confusing, I think, for many people.
Yeah.
To understand, did you have any responsibility for this scheme in a meaningful way?
We have responsibility for assessing the certification bodies for initial application and then ongoing annual assessment of their conformance with the standards. So it's quite
if they're failing, then you're failing.
If the system hasn't functioned as it was designed, it didn't deliver the right outcomes, not necessarily because of the way in which it was designed, but the way in which there was understanding and of the risk at an installation level or a measure level or a design level. And when you look at the data that Atkins-Realis analysed, it identified that there was a concentration of risk in specific installers or specific measures or in specific poor designs, and they should have been picked up much earlier in the process.
Sorry, it's just incredible what you've just said. Yeah. You've just said that it wasn't designed incorrectly, but it wasn't designed to properly assess the risks. Now, if the initial design doesn't properly assess the risks and where they are, then it's not designed properly, is it?
No, I didn't say it didn't design the risk. Or if I did, I would correct that. The system is set up on a risk model, particularly the certification of the installers. There is a standard called PAS 2031 that is developed and published by the British Standards Institute, and that sets within it a risk model for the surveillance of the installers, and it's based on a risk model moving from 1% up to 10%. And so based on the risk profile, understanding the level of non-compliances in the installations, the certification body can increase the level of surveillance. However, the information that the certification bodies or scheme providers have of the risk is based on 2 things: their own assessment of those installers, as well as data that comes from the Trustmark database.
Right.
And Trustmark's technical audit.
Which bit failed then? Was the risk wrongly assessed?
Two things, as highlighted in the NAO report, if I can just specifically quote from it. So there's 2 types of monitoring. It's really important to understand the risk profile of these issues.
If you're going to quote the report, could you tell us where you're going to, which page,
which
paragraph?
Of course.
Yeah, thank you.
I will, Chair. So if you look at page 48 and clause 314, the NAO report says clearly there are 2 types of on-site inspection within Eco and Eco4 and GBIS that should pick up problems with the quality of the installations. These are the certification body risk-based audits that check measures installed meet the requirements of PAS 2030, and Trustmark's audit that check the projects lodged in its data warehouse meet the requirements of PAS 2035. So there's 2 inputs of data, what the certification bodies do and what Trustmark brings out through its technical audits. Those technical audits used to be done by Ofgem, they were passed to Trustmark. So they're the inputs into that.
Right. So Mr. Ayres, then, is it your responsibility? Is that being passed over to you? Because somewhere between the two of you, there's a failing, isn't there?
My view on the